Well, we'll start off with outlining why it is important to vote yes in the blasphemy referendum on the same day as the presidential election on Friday week. It's important to support the right to freedom of belief and the right to freedom of speech, which are associated rights. They're not one in conflict with the other. And insofar as there's a balance between them, the Venice Commission, which is the international legal body that advises the Council of Europe states on constitutional issues, has examined that and concluded that laws against incitement to hatred on the grounds of religion should be a crime, but that blasphemy laws should not exist and should be repealed wherever they exist. And the thinking behind that is that laws against incitement to hatred on the grounds of religion exist to protect people, whereby laws against blasphemy exist to protect ideas. Now, every body that has examined the Irish blasphemy law since it was put in place in terms of examining the Constitution generally has concluded that it is obsolete, that it is anachronistic, and that it should be removed. That goes back as far as 1991 with the Law Reform Commission, the Constitutional Review Group in 1996, which was chaired by T.K. Whitaker, the All-Party Oireachtas Committee in the early 2000s, up to and including the recent Constitutional Convention. The Catholic Church thinks that it's obsolete. The Protestant churches think that it's obsolete. More or less everybody agrees that it should go, but the important task that we have ahead of us in the next 2 weeks is to ensure that enough people are aware that it's important to go out and actually vote in the referendum to do it. Now, as well as being obsolete, our blasphemy law is harmful. It's harmful in Ireland because some people think, well, look, it's never been formally enforced, and so what's the harm in it? But there are two reasons why it hasn't been enforced. One is that it initially wasn't enforced because when the only time that it was tested, the courts found that it didn't include a definition of what the offence consisted of, and therefore it couldn't be enforced. And so we had for a long time a blasphemy law in the books that literally couldn't be enforced. And so when the Oireachtas was updating, about 10 years ago, updating the Defamation Act within which the blasphemy law resides, everyone assumed that they would take that opportunity to remove the blasphemy law from the Defamation Act. And indeed that was what was happening as that bill made its way through the Oireachtas. But then at the last minute there was a change of Justice Minister, and the new Justice Minister decided instead to add in a definition of blasphemy to make it enforceable on the basis that the Constitution required it to be punishable in accordance with law. So we then had a blasphemy law that is enforceable, and one of the reasons that it hasn't had to be enforced since then is that generally a lot of the media just self-censor themselves. They don't want to get involved in even the possibility of a blasphemy case. And in fairness, that's not what they were set up to do. Radio stations or newspapers aren't set up to challenge the law, they're set up just to run media outlets and make profits for their owners. So we have been told, including I've been told personally, before live broadcast interviews, make sure you don't say anything that contravenes the blasphemy law. We have had articles submitted to print publications that have been edited or not published because of concerns about the blasphemy law. The NUJ, National Union of Journalists, has made the same point, that there is a self-censoring effect of having this law because media outlets simply don't want to touch even the possibility of getting involved in a blasphemy case. Now, the third reason that it is harmful is internationally. It breaches our human rights obligations. Ireland has signed up to various human rights treaties with which our blasphemy law is incompatible. We have been asked for decades by the United Nations Human Rights Committee to remove it. And when we passed the new blasphemy law in 2009, the Islamic states of the United Nations, who Ireland, along with other Western states, had been asking them to stop using blasphemy laws and apostasy laws to persecute minorities in their countries, including Christians, atheists, other minority religions, and indeed minority Muslim groups, including the Ahmadi Muslims. What the Islamic states started doing at the United Nations, led by Pakistan, when we passed our law, is they started incorporating wording from our law as what they wanted introduced internationally. And Heiner Bielefeld, acting at the time in his capacity as UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion and Belief, has told us that this is an issue of what he refers to as repressive states, liking to point to the hypocrisy of Western states telling them to stop doing what they're doing when we have laws such as the Irish blasphemy law. So, and of course in those states people are executed for blasphemy. The Christian woman Asia Bibi, who's currently awaiting execution in Pakistan, who had her final appeal held on Monday, and we're waiting for the judgment on that. So that's broadly the reasons that it's important to vote yes. The law is obsolete. The law is harmful in terms of its impact on the Irish media self-censoring itself, and the law is harmful in terms of it breaching our international human rights obligations and more repressive regimes using the existence specifically of the Irish blasphemy law as political cover for persecuting minorities in their own countries. So those are the reasons that we're asking people to vote yes in the referendum on the 26th of October. I'll pass over now to Professor David Nash from Oxford Brookes University, and he'll talk a little bit about the wider historical and international context and where the Irish blasphemy law fits in there.